Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for clicking on to the Monday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. First and foremost, before we crack on with the content of today, this is the sobering image of high-end Category 4 Hurricane Beryl. 150 mile per hour sustained winds within the eye wall crossing over Curacao Island as part of Grenada in the Leeward Islands here. So a very, very devastating situation unfolding in the Eastern Caribbean island chain. And I will be talking about this in quite a bit of detail in a tropical outlook, probably published later on tonight. So I just want to remind you of that here. Our thoughts and prayers are very much with the people of Curacao Island in the Lesser Antilles. So obviously, the July outlook has been released. That was released back on Saturday, and we will talk a little bit about how June has turned out to be, and also what July is likely to be as well. So before we continue with the video, hit that like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. It is always greatly appreciated. Did you check out the live stream yesterday? That was a 45-minute video discussing all things global weather. Yesterday afternoon, I thought it was quite a good day, a good afternoon. I must admit, it was always nice to tune in and interact with yourselves, the viewer. And also the tropical outlook was released back on Saturday as well. So it was another busy weekend here at Mark Vogan Weather HQ, and it will be another busy work week coming up with the global, not the global, the European outlook. So the month of June just gone, according to the initial stats from the Met Office, dry, cool and sunny June for the UK. So it was slightly below average in terms of temperature, and it was also drier than average. And I just wanted to point out this was the ideas in summary for June. This was released back at the very end of May. Average to below average, both in temperature and rainfall for the UK. Warmer, drier, Iberia and France, but wetter across central areas of Europe here. I think the warmer Iberia has probably been incorrect, but in terms of the UK and in terms of Ireland here, I think the forecast for the month of June has been pretty spot on. It also looks as if the CET, or the Central England temperature, was colder than the May just gone before it. And I think that is the first time we've seen that take place. So this is the rainfall anomaly across the UK. Only the far northwest of the UK seen a wetter than average June, and a lot of that is because of a west and northwesterly flow through at least the first half of June. It drove in convective showers aboard that rather cool northwesterly airflow, and therefore it was drier the further south you went over the UK, with the driest anomalies compared to average the further south you went. A cooler than average month. The average mean temperature for June was 12.9 Celsius. This is 0.4 below the long-term meteorological average. And this, if you look at the mean temperatures for the month, you've seen here the first few days were warmer than average, then it was firmly below that average all the way out to the 20th of the month. Then we've seen a change taking place, and this was forecast as well. Cool, drier first half of the month, warmer and slightly wetter second half to the month here, and then the final few days of the month, which probably anchored in this below average June idea, we had a below average final 2 or 3 days of the month. But this was the warm surge here that they did a little bit of a work on the cool anomaly, but nonetheless it ended up being slightly below average in terms of temperature. So I think the overall June outlook has been pretty good, and this was the result, obviously, given the information from the Met Office. I also wanted to point out a couple of interesting little things with regards to my own stats here at the house. The maximum temperature was 24.0 Celsius. The low was 2.1. We had the wettest day was 16.79 millimeters of rain. In total, we had 55.96 millimeters. 13 wet days, 17 dry days. Maximum wind gust of 42.1 kilometers per hour. Maximum pressure versus the minimum was 1029 versus 990. And what's really interesting here is this stat here. So the average temperature here at the house was 12.2 Celsius. That was 1 degree cooler than the month of May. And also, we also had Jeff Bradshaw, that is based in the West End of Glasgow in Paisley. He also recorded exactly 1 Celsius cooler in the month of June compared to the month of May, which I thought that was rather interesting. Two opposite ends of Scotland, and it was exactly a full degree cooler in June than the previous May. And also, incidentally, there was only 3 days here at the house where the temperature exceeded 20 Celsius in the month of June. In stark contrast, we had 6 days in the month of May above 20, and back last June, we actually had 15 days above 20 Celsius, and the maximum last June was in fact 27.1 Celsius. So that 24 is considerably lower than the maximum last month here. Also recorded a cooler minimum temperature compared to last June. Also, the minimum for May, incidentally, was 4.2 Celsius, which is considerably warmer for a minimum during the month of May compared to the 2.1 that was seen back in June as well. So we kind of flipped the 2 months on their head. May was obviously a good bit warmer in several aspects, but also there was quite a lot of interesting things to look at when you compare the 2 months and then you compare the previous June. And my records are quite short lived. The site only went up and it went online back in January last year. So there's only about a year and a half's worth of data. And it's interesting just to compare the 2 months, generally speaking. So this is the July ideas. Now, are we going to see a significant change during the month of July compared to June? I'm afraid there is a lot of reason to believe that this July may follow in a similar path to the month of June. So obviously this is freely available. There is a link in the description below today's video, but the July outlook is freely available on markvoganweather.com, so you can check that out at your leisure. Incidentally, there will also be a couple of little tweaks, not necessarily with the ideas and the forecast, but I have a few aspects to add into this, and that will be the case over the next couple of days here. But you can look through that at your leisure. I'm not going to read it word for word in terms of what's taking place during the month of June and also what's taking place during the month of July, what I expect to see. But anyway, this is a very, very interesting one here. This was sent to me by Richard Trott, a frequent contributor to Gav's Weather Vids, showing the 500 millibar anomaly for the month of June up until the 25th of the month. And we've seen a very significant ridge over the central North Atlantic with a trough extend from Canada all the way into the UK and Ireland. And then that dug into Central Europe. We had quite a wet June in the continent, over the continent. The warmest conditions, driest conditions, the further south and east you went over the country and continent. Now, warm sea surface temperature anomalies here is one of the reasons why I think the upper air pattern is going to look similar to this here. Three areas of high pressure, one over the North Pacific, one of the United States, and one over the central North Atlantic. Now, very, very similar, may I add, to what we've seen during the month of June here, with a negative over Canada, Greenland, and into the UK and Ireland, Western Europe here. I think that is likely going to reflect similar over the next 30 days or so here. So that warm water versus cool over the North Atlantic, I think the high is going to focus over that warm water. The trough is going to drop into the UK and Ireland here. Also, that warm water extending across the North Pacific, we may see a high equally park up over this general area here. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, we'll get a better view of these charts here. This is over a 30-day period, by the way, so this is obviously going to have variables in between, but generally you can see here region over the North Pacific, the United States, over the North Atlantic, with a possible weak trough over the eastern half of North America and over the western side of Europe as well here. That is the, what would this be? This is the ECMWF Extended Ensemble. This is the GFS Extended Ensemble, by the way. It's similar idea. North Pacific High, slightly further west with that core, high over the Plain States. We've got a little bit of a dip in the height field over the eastern side of North America. There's the high over the central North Atlantic. There's the negative over the UK and Ireland, if you notice here. So generally speaking, notice how similar both models and my drawing, which is a rather childlike impression of a weather chart, but nonetheless you get the overall idea. Drawn before seeing these charts, by the way. So before I kind of highlighted that the ridge and jet stream position that I envision, is that right? For the month of July, I did not see the GFS or the ECMWF idea. So very, very interesting how the models are kind of reflecting the ideas that I've got for the month of July here, and extremely similar to the 500 millibar geopotential heights for June through the 25th. Obviously, this is a 30-day mean, and there will be flexing back and forth, but take home for me is a cool, wet look, more likely than warm through at least the first half of July here. So similar idea, a cool first half of July, somewhat warmer across during the second half of the month, with the heat and worsening drought south and east of the continent. The above suggests that we could go through the entire first half of meteorological summer 2024 with a mere few days of warm to hot, and for some it was only a couple of days. So obviously that surge of warmth, temperature hit 30 Celsius 2 days in a row, 28 Celsius 3 days in a row. That was a very, very short-lived spell of summer warmth here. So obviously the take home is, and this is the title, any sign of proper summer sun and warmth in the month of July, because we simply have not really seen that. We had a flirt with it in June, but nothing particularly to write home about here. And unfortunately, I don't see it. I don't see a heat wave anytime over the next couple of weeks, at the very least, anyway. So I suspect the Atlantic sea surface temperature profile could work along with the wet west, dry east soil moisture content over the continent. So wet in the west, central, and dry in the east. I think the upper air pattern could feed off that anomalous dry versus wet in terms of soil. We will also need to watch potential tropical activity, especially if systems start to turn north and interact with the jet and rearranges the ridge trough pattern over our latitude here. So we will need to watch. I suspect there will be heat surges as heat builds over the Mediterranean, which will attempt to push north. I would not be surprised if, similar to June, we do see a surge of warmth lifting north here. That pattern is unlikely to maintain itself right the way through the month of July here. But this is the GFS Extended Ensemble in terms of rainfall over that 30-day period between the 20th of June and the 28th of July. This is how the precipitation forecast is looking like by the model. And incidentally, this is the temperature profile. It's actually shown firmly below average temperatures for the UK and Ireland and the near continent also for the month of July here. So prevailing west and northwesterly flow would mean wetter Scotland, Scandinavia, drier for England, the Low Countries, particularly the west, and especially drier in the southeast of Europe. Finally, here's a quick glance at the CFSV2 weeklies for the upper setup. Note the flat west flow becoming increasingly trophy with a northwesterly flow as the high positions over the central North Atlantic. Very similar to what we've seen in the month of June. So you can see here, this is the upcoming week. So this is quite a flat, deep trough extending from North America to the north of Europe here. Strong ridging underneath that. Very, very westerly in terms of the flow. That is not a particularly warm situation. This is the week 2, the 8 to 14 day period, which takes us to between the 5th and the 12th of July. You can see here bit more amplification to the pattern here. Strong ridge of high pressure anchored over the central plain states here. Cool troughiness over Canada. There's that extension northwards here of the central North Atlantic ridge up over Greenland into the Arctic with a firm trough anchored over the UK and Ireland. That is certainly a rather cool look for July, I'm afraid, and even into the following week here, which is the period between the 12th and the 19th of July, you still have that blocky look across the North Atlantic, extending up into the Arctic region. And that even continues into the following period here. That's actually the same chart, unfortunately. Need to check that and change that. 15th day 15 through 21 has been put in twice, unfortunately. So the verdict: what do we expect to see taking place? With the likely building of heat over Iberia and over the Mediterranean basin, I would expect an increased chance of seeing some northward migration, albeit brief, into the UK and Ireland during the second half of July. Like June, I see a cool first half, warmer second half, and this is what I summarise. I expect to see near average temperatures in both rainfall and temperature overall for the UK and Ireland, warmer from Iberia to the Baltic states here, across basically from across the Mediterranean basin and up the eastern side of the continent, with a very hot east and southeast Europe, wetter northwest, drier southeast. So very, very, very similar idea with July as to what we've seen in the month of June, I'm afraid, here. So heat lovers, you're going to have to stay patient, I'm afraid, because I don't see anything major. But I would not be surprised if we get a surge of true summer heat out of Iberia, out of the south, during the mid to second half of the month. So we'll wait and see what happens anyway. More on this and more in the week ahead forecast in tomorrow's video. Hit that like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate that. See you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.